What is going on, people? Carter here. Got another video for you. We're taking a look at the manual stitch featuring the Ram-Lok from Microtech knives, baby. Very cool stuff. I was fortunate enough to score one of these on the secondary market, although fortunate is a relative term because I overpaid, but it is what it is. I wanted to get one. I really wanted the black. Green was my second choice, as long as it wasn't the tan. And I actually really like the serrations. And I think that's the only reason I was able to score this, is other people don't like serrations. I do, especially Microtech and Emerson. Their serrations are top-notch, absolutely love them. So I was able to score this, check it out, see what I think of it. What I should be doing is asking people to let me borrow theirs rather than buying my own, but I'm an idiot and I don't do that. So I buy things and then check them out and sell them at a loss. My loss is your gain. So we're going to take a look at this knife. I think this review is going to be all good, right? it's going to be good and bad, right? I'll do what I like about it, and I'll also say some of the notes that I don't necessarily like about it, and I apologize in advance if I take a sip of coffee and that's annoying. It is what it is. It's in the morning here, so I'm just going to do it. So we have, let's do materials. M390, what are they calling it? You've probably heard of the shenanigans around this steel. Oh my gosh, what is it? M390 MK, I believe. Oh, right there, right in front of me. M390 MK. A lot of people are like, what is that? It's not exactly clear. I guess the story is that Microtech, who buys a lot of M390 from Bowler, got with them and did a proprietary blend. Not really a proprietary blend, but more like supposedly the tolerances of like the carbon content and such are a little bit tighter on this one, meaning they've all got variances like, 1 to 1.5% carbon. That's just an example. That's not what it actually is. But let's say that's Bowler's normal like variance of the carbon content of the steel. For Microtech, they tightened it up so it's 1 to 1.25% or whatever, right? That it's just more refined and more consistent. Not anything to write home about. It could all just be marketing hype. But M390 is pretty good. The irony is that Microtech is not known for heat treating their M390 all that well anyways. So to advertise this tighter percentage so predominantly, but then it's like, well, how about you just heat treat it correctly and it'll be way better. Anyways, that's not the point of this video. M390 MK steel. This is a collaboration with Borka Blades. Microtech has done a bunch of them, customs, autos. You can see the Borka logo right there. The Microtech chicken leg, the Microtech bald eagle leg right there. Very cool. The finish on this, stone washed. Sometimes if the light hits it just right, you can see some of the satin lines right there coming through right there. The flats are kind of raw, planed steel. Beautiful chamfering on this giant opening hole right there. It just has that Borka Blades look. Now, it's very striking and very aggressive and very cool. It is a little goofy though. This choil is massive. Like, this is a big blade. Like, let's take a look at it compared to a PM2. This is a big blade. We're talking large sizes here. Overall length is what? 8.5, just over 8.5 inches. I actually thought it was a little bigger than that, but big blade. But then when you look at the cutting length, you're talking about a 3-inch cutting length. But what we do, what we sacrifice in the name of cool, because this profile is just very unique, very cool. I absolutely dig it. And let's be honest, most of my cutting is done right here anyways. This is more than enough cutting length for 99.99% of the people out there. But it does give you options on choking up, getting a finer tip. You can go back on it. Really nice. Let's do a weight since we're doing some specs. It's a little beefy. It's actually a little beefier than I thought. 5.6 ounces, so not terrible. It's got some cool things going on though. So we've got G10 contoured and blasted on the handle. It's been a while since I've had a knife like this. It seems to be a pretty smooth blasting though. Microtech used to do kind of a heavier duty sandblasting on their G10 and it gave it a rougher texture. I actually prefer that. It's pretty smooth. green, like I mentioned. This has the Ram-Lok, which is a play. A lot of people compare it to the Axis lock, but I guess it depends on how you look at it. So it has a bar system, kind of, although it's not a bar. It's really this whole cage right here. But a bar system similar to the Axis lock, but it does not use springs like the Axis lock. It uses a spring more like the Manix 2, the ball lock. So it's kind of a hybrid of those two locking systems. Very robust, very easy to use. This whole piece here is verified steel, which is what I would expect it to be and what it needs to be, because this is what's locking. You can see here, we'll try to get an idea of how this works. So right now it's in detent mode. It's got a little hump that presses down on that cage. It's not a hard shelf, so it doesn't lock it closed, obviously, but that's what provides the detent. And then it rides along the back of that tang until it gets to this ledge, and then it locks up here. So it locks up behind, kind of like a compression lock from Spyderco Paramilitary 2, just like this. This locks up behind the tang in the similar way. So pretty cool. You know, some people have said, you know, they're just jumping on the fact that the Axis lock is public domain now and kind of stealing that. But I think they kind of took some of the best parts of a lot of the locks like this, spring locks like this, kind of combined them and then added their own flair to it. I really like the grip on both sides here. We'll get to the negatives here in a minute, or not really negatives, but things I don't absolutely love. A lot of screws going on this body here. Primarily, Microtech likes to make their stuff pretty stout in general, but you can see this all has to be encased in like a cage. And so this cage needs to be firmly set so it doesn't move, because this is the whole locking mechanism. So these are absolutely necessary. And then you've got just some screws down here to hold the body together. You know, probably could have got away with just one down here. Most of the effort is here. And unlike a frame lock, where the lock itself is somewhat wanting to split the scales apart, if you've ever taken apart a frame lock, the second you release these screws, it kind of pops off, right? Because this pressure is pushing against the blade and wants to split it. You don't have that here. There's nothing trying to push this apart. Not that this is a huge amount of force. I'm not saying that, but just a side note there. This doesn't have that because of this lock right here. Titanium pocket clip. Goes in and out of the pocket super easy. I would almost argue maybe a little too easy. I guess that's up to you. Depends on the pants you wear. But not a ton of spring tension, and it's just a flat, crimped piece of titanium. Titanium back spacer right there. You got your lanyard hole. Already mentioned the G10. Relatively simple design, honestly, and when you look at the parts involved, it's not that crazy compared to, you know, because you might look at this and say, oh, it's complicated, it's got springs and all these things, but if you compare it to something like this, number of parts, number of components, I don't know, it'd be cool to do a full count, but not really different. Yeah, you've got the cage, you've got the spring, you've got this, but on here you've got lock bar insert and detent ball and some other things going on, so pretty much not that crazy. So benefits of something like this, obviously one hand open and closed, but your fingers are out of the way of the blade, right? That's the big thing. And for us knife guys, not a big deal. We're so used to it. But if you've ever handed somebody your knife to check out that aren't used to knives, they're terrified and they're perplexed and they don't know how to operate it, and they almost cut their finger off every time. And then you're like, I shouldn't allow that to happen. That happened to me over the weekend. I was letting my sister's parents-in-law, right? Is that what it's called? Yeah, in-laws, handle a knife. They wanted to check it out, and it was a frame lock, and whew, it was a little sketchy. So it allows you to keep your fingers out of the way. Downside, yeah, so let's talk negatives here. Now, keep in mind this may be specific to this knife. I don't know. I do have a little bit of play, ever so slightly, like just a little bit of wiggle this way, and I have tried to break it in to see if it went away, but it hasn't, and I think it's just the way this is engaging. It's not completely ramped so that it's airtight. I'm 100% convinced or confident that it will not fail, right? It's not like slipping. It just has a little bit of play, and it's a little bit harder for these locks because something isn't quite angled enough to get this to be tight. If I push on this though, then it's all of a sudden rock tight for a minute, and then it kind of comes back a little. So a little bit of wiggle there. I believe this is running on bearings. Nice and smooth drop here. Just like a cold steel triad lock, because this whole width of this tang is riding against this, and that's what's providing the resistance. There is a little bit of grittiness here. Some of it's gone away with me breaking it in, but it's definitely not super smooth. And that's just kind of the nature of this. When you have something like this, you're able to, this ceramic detent ball is a very small point of contact. So it's like super smooth. You can make it super smooth. With this one, because it's steel on steel and it's rubbing against this whole width here, and it has the pressure of this lock to prevent it from just falling open. Yeah, there's a lot of rubbing there. It'll probably continue to break in. Now, could you do something about that? Probably. If you reduce the point of contact here so that it's not this whole width rubbing against that whole width of the tang, you could put maybe a ceramic ball in there potentially. You could just reduce the amount of surface area. All kinds of stuff you could do to make it a little bit smoother, but it's not bad. I'm not saying it's like super gritty, but you definitely, I mean, you can feel it, right? It's you know, just how it's not really drop shut, you know. The other thing is you can't, you know, flicking this is difficult for two reasons. One is the elongation of the hole here. It's difficult to get a good place. Like, you kind of would want the hole to be here, and then you could like do it. But the other thing is, once again, the nature of this type of knife, the detent has so much, this is all detent, right? It doesn't have a short, crisp, I keep going back to this one, no detent, no detent, no, there's the detent. See, much smaller range of detent before it sucks it in. Whereas this one has a softer, much longer detent, like, see how far? Detent starts right here. So that's a lot of detent to get through before you can even flick it open. So you can use wrist, but you're not really going to be able to flick it open without wrist. So this is more of a slow open type knife, or a pull this down and flick it open type thing. So you do kind of get that option as well. Those are the main points I wanted to cover on this knife, in case you were curious about getting it. When we talk about ergonomics, it's good. It just has the basic shape. It's a large knife, it's a wide knife, but it's a lot of fun, and I think it's really cool. I love the stitch design, and I hope it continues to carry on in different versions. It's a pretty frickin' cool knife, and I'm hoping to see some signature series on this with carbon fiber and things like that. For those that are new to Microtech, they've been doing manual knives for a long time. In fact, they've got some really cool manual knives they did back in the early 2010s onto like the 15s that I think still hold up pretty dang well, like the whale shark and things like that. You know, I mean, they're not like the latest trendy fidget small thing, but they don't look dated. Like they still look good. So Microtech is pretty good at doing fairly within reason. You know, obviously doing something truly timeless is difficult, but their stuff still looks good. It's still strong, still holds up. And I think that'll be the case with their new designs as well. Oh, one last note. Anybody that's concerned about this spring, don't be. Microtech uses high quality springs. Springs have been used in magazines for firearms for years. They've been loaded for 20 years at a time. They still function. Springs are way more robust and better than you probably think they are. The only thing that I would be concerned about taking the spring out is corrosion, right? Just because it's a little more susceptible to corrosion, not because it's not stainless, but just because it doesn't take much corrosion to affect the spring, whereas this blade would take a lot of corrosion for it to actually affect the functionality of the blade or any of these other parts, right? Because they're thicker steel, and it's just not really going to corrode all the way through, whereas the spring technically could corrode through pretty easy. And then once that happens, the lock will cease to function at all, really. I wasn't going to say correctly, but really it just won't function at all. I mean, you could manually hold it up, I guess. But anyways, side note, random thought, cool knife, Ram-Lok stitch from Microtech. I would say I don't know, is the hype real? Yeah, kind of. I mean, you know, it's not some of the hype, right? It's a cool knife. It is. It's a cool knife. People have wanted it ever since the auto stitch came out. People have wanted a manual version. This is an excellent implementation of that. However, these will be available every day of the week here soon. So if you want one and you're just waiting for the price to come down, it's going to happen quick. All right, guys, that's it. Leave comments down below. What do you think of the stitch? Do you have one? Are you going to get one? Do you think it's goofy? What do you think of the points I made? Let me know what you think down below. Thanks, guys.